When my son said he didn't want to hurt me, I smiled instead of crying. I told him, "You could never hurt me, baby. You're my whole heart." But hearts can break quietly, without anyone raising their voice. My name is Mary. I've been a mother for almost 40 years, and this story, it isn't about anger or betrayal, it's about love, the kind that changes shape, even when you don't want it to. I was 19 when I held my son for the first time. He came into this world on a rainy Sunday morning. The nurse placed him in my arms, and the sound of thunder outside felt like a blessing, not a storm. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the reason I was born. We didn't have much back then. A small house, secondhand furniture, and a lot of hope. But when you're a young mother, love feels like enough to feed the whole world. I used to sit by the window while he slept, sewing little clothes by hand, whispering prayers for his future, that he'd never know hunger or loneliness or the kind of pain that visits you at night when the world goes quiet. He grew up fast, too fast, maybe. The first time he called me Mommy, I cried. The first time he said, "I can do it myself," I laughed. And every little moment in between, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, I stored it like treasure in my heart. His father and I didn't last long. Sometimes love just wears out like an old coat, still warm but full of holes. After the divorce, it was just the two of us, me and my boy, my reason for getting up every morning. I worked double shifts at the hospital cafeteria. Some nights, I'd come home with tired feet and a smile that was mostly pretend, but the moment he ran to hug me, all the ache disappeared. He was a bright child, quiet, kind, the kind of boy who'd help his teacher carry boxes or give his lunch to a classmate who forgot theirs. People used to tell me, "Mary, you raised him right." And I'd say, I tried to raise him with love. Love was all I had. When he got older, he became more independent, as boys do. The hugs got shorter, the phone stayed busier, and dinner conversations turned into, "Just a minute, Mom." But I didn't mind. I told myself, it's just life moving forward. Children grow, and mothers learn to let go 1 inch at a time. He went off to college in another city, the first in our family to do it. I remember packing his bags like it was a celebration and a funeral at the same time. I put a note inside his suitcase. "No matter how far you go, my love is already there." The day he left, I stood on the porch, waving as his bus disappeared down the road. When the dust settled, the silence was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first few weeks, he called often, told me about classes, new friends, the cafeteria food he hated. I'd listen, laugh, and tell him to take care of himself. But then, life happened. Calls turned to texts, texts turned to, "I'll call later," and later became someday. Still, I never complained. A mother's heart learns patience before it learns pain. When he got graduated, I wore my best dress. It wasn't fancy, just blue cotton with white buttons, but I felt like a queen. Seeing him in that gown, cap tilted just right, I thought, maybe every sleepless night was worth it. After the ceremony, he hugged me and said, "Mom, I couldn't have done it without you. And for a moment, it felt like time folded back, like my little boy was there again, just taller, with eyes full of gratitude. But gratitude fades. Distance doesn't always mean miles. Sometimes it's just new priorities. He found a job in another state, fell in love, and eventually got married. I met her once before the wedding, his fiancée. She was polite, soft-spoken, and beautiful in that quiet, modern way. I wanted to love her. I wanted to believe she would love him as much as I did. When he called to say they were having a small ceremony, just close friends, I told him I understood. I even said, "That's wonderful, honey. You do what makes you happy." But that night, I cried into the same pillow I used to hold him on when he was a baby. I never wanted to be the kind of mother who made her child feel guilty for living his life, so I stayed silent. I smiled at pictures they sent. I mailed birthday cards and gifts that sometimes went unanswered. Still, love doesn't shrink when it's ignored. It just waits, quietly. Years passed that way. Little visits, phone calls that started with, "Hey, Mom," and ended with, "I gotta go." And me, sitting at the kitchen table, listening to the echo of a dial tone, whispering, "Take care, baby." I kept our home the same all those years. His room still had the posters, the books, even the old baseball glove he left behind. Every Sunday I'd dust the shelves, not because they were dirty, but because it made me feel close to him. Sometimes neighbors would say, "Mary, you spoil that boy. You should let him grow up." And I'd smile saying, "He's already grown. I'm just remembering the parts when he wasn't." But love can be lonely when it has nowhere to go. That's when things began to change. The calls became rarer, the tone colder, and one day, a single sentence, spoken softly, almost kindly, would change everything between us. But before I tell you what he said, I want to tell you how it felt to stand in the kitchen holding the phone, knowing my own child was about to break my heart without even realizing it. The first time I noticed something had changed was in his voice. He still called me Mom, but there was something careful about it. Like he was afraid of saying too much, or maybe of saying the wrong thing. "Hey, Mom," he'd start, "we're doing fine, just busy, you know how it is." And I'd laugh softly, pretending I did. Pretending I knew what it felt like to have a life so full there was no room left for me. I'd ask about his job, and he'd give short answers. I'd ask about her, my daughter-in-law, and he'd say, "She's good. She's working a lot too." Then silence would fall between us, the kind that used to be comfortable, but now felt like a wall. Still, I tried to stay positive. I told myself that's just how life works. Children build their own homes, their own dreams. A mother's role changes from being needed every day to being remembered sometimes. But remembering isn't the same as being loved. A few months later, he called to say they'd bought a new house. "Oh, that's wonderful," I said, smiling into the phone, my hands bright even though my hands trembled. "It's a bit far, Mom," he added. "About 4 hours' drive from your place." 4 hours? I repeated, trying to sound cheerful. "Well, that's not too bad. Maybe I can come visit sometime. There was a pause. Yeah, maybe, he said, almost softly. We're still unpacking and, trying to get used to the space. I understood what he meant. We need time. We need space. So, I waited. I started sending them care packages every now and then. Homemade cookies, a little sweater I knitted, framed photos from his childhood. One day, a box came back unopened. I thought it might have been a mistake. Maybe they'd moved again. I called him. "Sweetheart, did you get the package I sent?" He hesitated.
"Oh, yeah, Mom, about that. You don't have to send things, really. We're trying to keep things simple. No clutter." No clutter. The words sat heavy in my chest. I wanted to say, love isn't clutter, baby. Memories aren't mess. But instead I said, of course, honey, I understand. Life became quiet after that. I filled my days with small things, the garden, church on Sundays, baking bread for the neighbors. People would ask, "How's your son?" And I'd smile, the kind of smile that hides both pride and pain. "Oh, he's doing well. Got a lovely wife, a new home. God's been good." Inside, though, I missed him like air. I missed the sound of his laughter from the next room. The way he'd ask, "Mom, do we have anything sweet?" As if he were still 10 years old. The little notes he used to leave on the fridge. "Love you, Mom. Be back soon." Now the only notes I saw were bills and grocery lists. Then one afternoon he called. His voice was tight, careful again. "Mom, we're hosting a small dinner next month. Thought you might want to come." I almost dropped the phone. "Oh, honey, I'd love to." I could hear him smile. "Yeah, it'll be nice. But, could you call first before coming? Just so we can plan around things?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Of course, sweetheart, I'll do that." When we hung up, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had already gone cold. I stared at the steam fading from the cup, thinking, when did I become a guest in my own child's life? The night of the dinner, I wore my best dress, the same blue one from his graduation. I baked an apple pie, his favorite, and wrapped it in foil. The drive felt longer than it was, maybe because my heart was too full of memories. When I reached the house, it was beautiful, larger than I imagined, with tall windows and a garden full of trimmed roses. I stood there for a moment, taking it in. My son had done well, really well. He opened the door, smiling. "Mom, you made it." He hugged me, short, polite, and I held on a second too long. Inside, the house smelled new. Everything was neat, perfect, quiet. His wife came out of the kitchen, smiling gently. "Hello, Mrs. Carter." "Oh, just call me Mary," I said, smiling back. "And this must be your lovely home. You've made it beautiful." She thanked me, but there was a stiffness in her voice, like a politeness built from distance. We sat down for dinner. Conversation flowed easily between them, about work, friends, plans. I laughed when they did, even when I didn't quite understand the jokes. At one point, I mentioned how I still kept his old baseball glove. He smiled, embarrassed. "Mom still has everything," he said, glancing at her. "She never throws anything away." She laughed politely, then changed the subject. I felt the air shift, just a little, the kind of silence that doesn't belong to anyone but everyone feels. After dinner, I offered the pie. "I made this for you," I said softly. His wife looked hesitant. Oh, thank you, but we're cutting back on sweets. Maybe next time. I nodded, my smile faltering. Of course, dear. No problem. My son put his hand on mine. Mom, you don't have to do all this, really. I know I don't, I said quietly. But I like to. We talked a bit more before I left. He walked me to the car. The night air was cool, and the street lights made everything look softer, lonelier. As I turned to go, I said, You know I'm proud of you, baby. You've built a good life. He smiled. Thanks, Mom. I just don't want you to worry about me. I never stop worrying, I said with a small laugh. That's a mother's job. He hugged me, tighter this time, and said, I love you. And for a moment, that was enough. Weeks went by, then months. The calls became even shorter. Sometimes they didn't even come at all. I told myself he was busy. That's what good men are, busy, building their lives. But sometimes when the clock ticked past midnight and I was still awake, I wondered if maybe I had built my whole world around someone who'd already moved on from mine. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to call him. It rang for a while, then went to voicemail. I waited a few minutes, then tried again. This time he answered. Hey, Mom, he said, his tone a little strained. Sorry, we're kind of in the middle of something. Oh, I won't keep you. Just wanted to check in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Yeah, he sighed. Things have been, complicated lately. Everything all right? Yeah, just, life stuff. I wanted to ask what kind of life didn't have room for a mother's voice, but instead I said softly, All right, sweetheart, I'll let you go. Just wanted to hear your voice. He paused. I'll call you soon, Mom. Promise. I smiled into the receiver. I'll be waiting. He didn't call. That winter, the loneliness settled heavier. The house felt colder, quieter. Even the radio seemed tired of playing old songs. I started writing letters again, not to send, just to feel close to him. Dear son, I'd write. Remember when you used to run into my room during thunderstorms? You said you weren't scared, but I could feel your little heart racing against mine. Then I'd stop, wipe my tears, and whisper, You're still my boy, even if you forget. It was spring when he finally called again. His voice was calm, but something was different. Mom, he said, can we talk? Of course, baby. Everything all right? Yeah, I just think we might need to set some boundaries. Boundaries? The word echoed in my chest like a door closing. What do you mean, sweetheart? I asked quietly. It's just, we need our own space. Sometimes it feels like you still see me as your little boy, and I'm not that anymore. I smiled sadly, even though he couldn't see me. I know you're not, baby, but you'll always be my son. He sighed, softer this time. I don't want to hurt you, Mom. I swallowed hard. I know you don't. But you did, I whispered after he hung up. That night after his call, I sat in my living room long after the lights had gone out. The phone still lay on the table, its screen dim and lifeless, like the end of a conversation that had nowhere else to go. He said he didn't want to hurt me, but hurt doesn't always come in shouting or slamming doors or cruel words. Sometimes it comes in pauses, in the empty spaces where I miss you should have been, in the quiet where laughter used to live. I looked around the house. Every corner still carried his echo. The old clock on the wall that used to chime right when he came home from school. The scuffed table from when he spilled paint helping me with crafts. Even the little dent on the hallway wall where he once kicked his ball too hard. All those imperfections, all those tiny marks, they were my treasures. proof that he had been here once? That I had once been needed? I whispered into the dark, "You didn't hurt me by leaving. You hurt me by forgetting." The next morning, I tried to keep busy. I went to the market, smiled at the vendors, bought apples even though I didn't need them. I told the lady at the flower stall that my son loved tulips. I don't even know if he still does. I just wanted to say his name out loud to someone. It made me feel like he was still mine in some small way. Back home, I set the apples on the counter and started baking again. It was silly. I baked his favorite pie, even though there was no one to eat it. When the smell filled the room, I closed my eyes and imagined he was sitting at the table again. "Mom, is it ready yet?" His voice played in my mind, so clear, so close, I almost answered. When I opened my eyes, there was only the sound of the oven timer. That night, I found myself standing in front of the old photo albums. I hadn't opened them in years. The covers were worn, edges faded, but the pages inside still held color. Memories frozen in time. There he was, a little boy in overalls, missing a front tooth, holding my hand at the zoo. Then his graduation photo, his smile full of pride. And then the wedding picture. I stared at that one for a long time. He looked happy, and I was too that day. But even in the photo, I can see it now. The way his hand leaned toward her, the way his eyes searched for her approval.
Not mine. That's when I realized something. I had lost him long before that phone call. I just hadn't wanted to see it. A few weeks passed. I didn't call him. Not out of pride. I just didn't want to be the only one reaching anymore. Then one afternoon, I got a message. It wasn't from him. It was from a neighbor of his. She said she'd seen him and his wife at a local park with their new baby. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it again and again. A baby. My grandchild. No one had told me. I sat down slowly, the phone slipping from my hands. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, numb, staring at nothing. Then quietly, my heart broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the soft kind of breaking that feels like breathing in glass. I didn't call him that night. I didn't call him the next day either. What would I even say? Congratulations for the life I'm not part of? For the moments I'll only see through strangers' words? Instead, I went into his old room. Everything was still there. The trophies, the faded posters, the books he never finished. I sat on his bed and whispered, "You have a baby now. You're a father." My voice cracked. "And I'm still your mother." The following Sunday at church, during the prayer for families, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears streamed down my face, silent but steady. After the service, a kind woman patted my shoulder and asked if I was all right. I smiled weakly and said, "Yes, just proud of my son." Because that's what mothers do. We cry in secret and smile in public. Days turned into weeks. No call, no message. Then one morning I saw his name flash on my phone screen. My hands trembled as I picked up. "Mom?" he said softly. "I've been meaning to call. Things have been crazy." I took a deep breath. "I heard you're a father now." He hesitated. "Yeah, we were going to tell you. Just wanted to settle first." A smile faintly. "Congratulations, baby." He exhaled, maybe out of guilt, maybe relief. "Thanks, Mom." There was silence. Not awkward, just heavy. So many words lived inside that pause. All the missed moments, the things unsaid. I asked, "Can I see her? Just once." He sighed. "I don't know, Mom. She's still little and, you know, with how things are." I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "I understand." But inside, something wilted. That night, I sat by the window watching the rain. A thought crossed my mind, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. I realized that sometimes love hurts not because it's rejected, but because it changes shape. He still loved me. I could hear it in his voice. But it wasn't the same love. It wasn't the kind that comes home. It was the kind that remembers, but doesn't return. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that had to be. That night I took out a pen and wrote him a letter I never sent. "My dear son, I know you didn't mean to hurt me. Life pulls us in different directions, and love stretches like a thread. Sometimes it doesn't break. It just goes quiet. I want you to know I forgive you for the silence. Because I understand now. This distance isn't unkindness. It's just growing. I just wish you had told me you were still holding that thread too." I folded the letter, placed it inside his old baseball glove, and set it on his shelf. That was my goodbye. Not to him, but to the part of me that couldn't let go. Years passed, not in a rush, but in slow, deliberate days. Morning sunlight still came through the kitchen window, landing on the same old wooden table where my son once ate his breakfast before school. Only now, the chair across from me stayed empty, and I had stopped setting out 2 cups of tea. At first, that silence hurt like a wound that refused to close. I'd reach for my phone sometimes, scrolling up to the last message he sent. "I'll call soon, Ma." That soon stretched into months, then years. But pain, I learned, doesn't stay sharp forever. It dulls. It settles. It becomes something you carry, like a soft ache behind your ribs. I began finding small ways to fill my days. I planted marigolds in the front yard, my husband's favorite flowers, and talked to them as if they could hear me. I joined a small women's circle at church. We'd meet every Thursday to knit, gossip, and share stories of our children. The ones who called and the ones who didn't. I wasn't alone, I realized. So many mothers like me, with love overflowing, but nowhere to place it. We didn't need to say much. A gentle nod, a hand on the shoulder. That was enough. We understood each other's silence. Sometimes I walked by the park where I used to take my boy when he was little. The same swings still stood there, only rustier, slower. I'd sit on the bench where I once watched him laugh with ice cream running down his chin. And in that moment, I'd close my eyes and whisper, "Thank you, God, for letting me love him this long." One evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, the voice on the other end hesitated. Then softly, "Ma?" It had been 3 years. For a second, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. The only sound I managed was a trembling, "Yes, baby." He told me he was sorry, that life had gotten complicated, that his wife didn't like how often he visited because she felt left out. I listened quietly. No anger, no accusation, just the stillness that comes when you've already grieved something and learned to forgive it. I told him, "Son, you don't owe me perfect, just truth. I can live with distance, but not lies." He cried. For the first time since he was a child, he cried over the phone. And in that moment, something shifted again, not back to how things used to be, but towards something gentler. We started small after that. A call every few weeks, then a visit. Then one day, a Sunday dinner. When he walked through the door, taller and more tired than I remembered, I didn't see the man who left me behind. I saw my boy again, just older, carrying his own kind of loneliness. His wife came too. I greeted her kindly, offered her my best plate, and told her how happy I was to finally meet her. She looked surprised, maybe expecting bitterness, but I had none left to give. Time had already washed that away. That night after dinner, I stood by the window, watching the two of them drive off. The taillights faded down the road, and instead of crying, I smiled. Because I finally understood something. Motherhood isn't about keeping your children close. It's about loving them enough to let them go, and still wishing them warmth when they forget to call. I began writing letters after that. Not to send, just to write. Letters about memories, recipes, and lessons I'd learned. I kept them in a small wooden box labeled, "For when he's ready." Because sometimes love is patient. It waits quietly, without blame. When I felt lonely, I'd make tea for one and look out the window at the marigolds. Their petals danced in the evening light as if they were waving hello. And I'd whisper to myself, He didn't mean to hurt me. He just didn't know how to stay. Years later, when my hands grew slower and my steps smaller, my son came again, this time not out of guilt, but out of love. He brought his little girl with him, my granddaughter. Her name was Hope. He ran into my arms as if we'd known each other forever. Her laughter filled the house in the same way her father's once did. "Grandma," she said, holding my wrinkled hands, "Daddy says you make the best pie in the world." I laughed. Did he now? As I baked that evening, my son stood beside me, quietly helping. He didn't talk much, but he didn't have to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, forgiving. Sometimes peace doesn't come as a moment. It comes as a series of small, ordinary days where you find joy in the very things that once reminded you of loss. And as I tucked my granddaughter into bed that night, she whispered, "Grandma, do you love Daddy?" I smiled. Yes, with everything I have, always will. When I lay down later, the house was quiet again. But this time, the quiet didn't hurt. It was. I closed my eyes and thought about the years, the love, the pain, the letting go. And I realized that motherhood doesn't end when your child stops calling. It lives on in the way you forgive, the way you still cook his favorite meal, the way you smile when someone says his name. Because love, real love, doesn't demand to be seen. It just is. And as sleep took me that night, I whispered one last time, "He didn't want to hurt me. And maybe he never did." There's something quiet that happens when you've lived through enough seasons of love and loss. You stop chasing answers and you start understanding silence. In my younger years, I thought love meant holding on, keeping everyone close, fixing every distance, explaining every hurt. But now, sitting by the same window where I once waited for phone calls that never came, I realize love also means knowing when to stop reaching and start trusting. Trusting that the people you raised carry a part of you, even when they forget to call. Trusting that kindness echoes farther than anger ever could. And trusting that life in its own mysterious rhythm always brings things back in ways you never expect. I used to wonder, what did I do wrong? Was I too protective? Too soft? Too hard? But as time passed, I stopped measuring my motherhood by how often my son visited and started measuring it by how much love I gave, even when no one saw it. Because that's the kind of love mothers know best, the quiet kind, the kind that waits without demand, the kind that forgives without an audience. When my son came back years later, I didn't need an apology. His presence was enough. His daughter's laughter was enough. Even the simple, "Ma, how are you feeling today?" That was enough. It's funny, isn't it? We spend our lives wanting grand gestures, but the older we get, we realize that peace is hidden in small things. A cup of tea that doesn't go cold, a message that just says thinking of you, a memory that makes you smile instead of cry. Now, when I tell my story to younger mothers in our neighborhood, the ones still learning to let go, I always say, don't count the calls. Count the love. Because one day when the house is quiet and the years are heavy, you'll remember not the hurt, but the laughter, the birthday candles, the nights you stayed up waiting, the mornings you kissed their forehead. You'll remember the warmth, not the wounds. As I sit here tonight, the moonlight falls softly across my kitchen table. The marigolds sway outside. There's a framed photo of my son, his wife, and little Hope on the shelf, all smiling. I look at it every night before bed, and every time I whispered the same simple prayer, thanked you, God, for letting me love them, even from afar. Because that's what love really is. Not ownership, not control, not constant presence, but quiet, unconditional care. It doesn't fade with distance. It doesn't die with silence. It simply changes shape. Sometimes it becomes a prayer, sometimes a memory, sometimes just a smile on a lonely evening. And maybe that's enough. If my story ever reaches someone, maybe a mother sitting alone tonight, holding her phone and wondering why her child hasn't called, I want her to know you are not forgotten. You are loved even in absence, and the love you gave is still living in your child's kindness, in their laughter, in the way they hold their own children someday. So rest. You did enough. You were enough. And the love you planted will bloom again, even if you aren't there to see it. My son said he didn't want to hurt me. And maybe he never did. Maybe he just needed to learn what love costs before he could come home again.